Did you have confidential human sources dressed as Trump supporters inside the Capitol on January the 6th prior to the doors being open?
Again, I had to be very careful.
It should be a no. Can you not tell the American people no? We did not have confidential human sources dressed as Trump supporters positioned inside the Capitol.
Gentleman's time has expired.
You should not read anything into my decision not to share information.
Director Wray,
confidential human
gentleman's time has expired.
I need that on my coffee cup, Congressman. Should be a no.
It really should have been.
And what my intention was to reveal that the director was either going to deny what I already knew to be the truth. I have evidence that the FBI had either agents or confidential human sources dressed as Trump supporters inside the Capitol prior to the doors being open, and that was my opportunity to give the man a chance to explain himself. And instead, he obfuscated and avoided the question with the same crap we've been hearing from him for 2 years about I can't comment on confidential human sources. And man, we're not asking you to identify the people. We're not asking you to, tell us the names and where they live or how much you pay them or anything like that. But the director of our FBI, America's premier federal law enforcement agency, should indeed be able to reassure the American people that they were not engaged in an operation designed to create havoc within the people's capital on January the 6th. And I believe they absolutely were engaged in that. And I'm one of the ones pushing for the release, by the way, of all the J6 video. We got 60,000 hours of video from January 4th, 5th, and 6th. I want it all released to the American people so that we can crowdsource that investigation and have men like you with your intention to seek truth, and Americans across the country, and indeed concerned men and women across the world look at these videos so that the truth can be fully revealed. So I'm not falling for this story of that I'm even hearing from some of my colleagues that the release of all that video will somehow endanger the Capitol or members of Congress. That's crazy, man. The American people deserve the truth about J6. I intend to see to it that we get full reveal, and the people that were involved in staging that thing and participating in it should be held to account.
So, one, I'm so sick of that excuse. Is always the excuse, right? The overclassification in Washington, D.C., that's just hiding information from the American people that they are ashamed of.
Right.
There's no reason why we shouldn't have the JFK files, for instance, right? Like right now, right? Anyone who could have conceivably been involved in that is long gone, right? But they want to hide the truth from us, and even the small clips that we get, like the ones that have been playing beside you, these are clips that the audience knows well. They know your clip well because we must have played it 20 times at least on the show. But they know these clips well because you can see the undercover agents pushing people to go inside of the Capitol. These are the footage that's released from the body cams from the police officers that were embedded, that were dressed as MAGA supporters outside. And so what I'd like to ask for you is, I mean, maybe you could break some news here. You had such confidence in asking Christopher Wray that question. You clearly had an ace up your sleeve. You had the cards. You held the deck during that exchange. What have you seen? What do you know about the FBI's operations inside of the Capitol for people dressed as MAGA supporters?
I've seen exactly that. I've seen that. I have evidence of the arrival of. I have not been able to identify the individual human beings and trace their employment and who they work for, and who was paying them, and seeing their data streams on digitally of who they are and what they were doing. But we have plenty of evidence of uh, of men that appear to be professionals and dressed as Trump supporters arriving in D.C. and dispersing themselves in a very organized manner throughout the J6 protesters and the rally participants, which is mostly who was in town, but almost 100% peaceful, and yet there were like pockets of strange agitation, and we've traced that stuff back. We have some very condemning video files that we were able to get hold of that appear to show some professionals dressed as Trump supporters, decked out in MAGA regalia inside the Capitol prior to the doors being open. And so obviously the conclusion that a reasonable man would arrive at is that if the police have congregated at the doors of the Capitol to keep out some perceived threat and that perceived threat is identified visually as someone dressed as Trump supporters. And if you see video of men dressed as Trump supporters behind those police officers and walking around freely, then I think it's very reasonable to conclude that those men dressed as Trump supporters were in some way working with law enforcement, or else law enforcement would have been turning around and saying, what are those guys doing back? Hey, somebody get those guys. So, and the doors we're talking about, brother, man, these doors don't just get casually opened, by the outside, especially if there's some threat and the Capitol Police and all the law enforcement here have congregated to secure the perimeters of the Capitol. These doors don't just get accidentally left open and people walking in. It's under police control. So and to back this thing up, I don't know how deep you want to go in this rabbit hole, but the groups that were being monitored by the FBI in the months leading up to January 6th, in the months prior to the election in November of 2020, those groups were infiltrated by FBI operatives and agents quite effectively. That's something that the FBI does very well. They pose as people that want to be involved in this group, this online group. They get accepted. Their chats are accepted as genuine. This is part of normal, effective investigative work. But if you follow those chat threads, those threads did not include any suggestion of any sort of like aggressive action until it was suggested on those threads by the FBI agents who had infiltrated the threads. It goes back months. You understand? And I have files inches thick of binders and binders of this stuff behind me. And I have digital files as well. It's difficult to even navigate through it all. But as you get into it, you quickly realize this something was being staged. Something was being staged. And ultimately that became January 6th. So, anybody out there that knows me well enough to know that I'm quite I'm very serious about investigations if I get involved in one. I'm not interested in false allegations. I'm not interested in conspiracy theories. I don't care about any of that. I seek truth. And the truth in this case regarding our government's involvement in the months and weeks of interacting with groups that were going to come participate either in election ancillary actions around the elections in November of 2020, or ultimately what became the president's rally on January 6th and the very somber duty that we were required to perform congressionally regarding the confirmation of the electoral slates and the certification of electoral slates from every sovereign state. You'd have had to been living under a rock to not know that there was potential for problems that day. And as we look back on what built up to the days prior to January 6th here in DC, we see FBI fingerprints all over it. So you can call me crazy if you want to, but I'm a solid investigator, and there's a tremendous amount of evidence that's quite disturbing. If you're a free American and a patriot and you love your country and your fellow man and you respect the rights of your fellow man, it's quite concerning when our own most significant federal law enforcement agency appears to be working against us.
So, one, thank you for your work in illuminating this for us. I'm fascinated just by listening to you right now because I'm hearing things that I have not heard before. Two, skepticism is always required in a situation like this. You must always be able to ask questions. The people who tell you to believe and swallow the official narratives, those are the evil people. And so I'll ask you a simple binary question here. Do you believe that Nancy Pelosi wanted January 6th to happen?
Well, that's a rather pointed question. Let me say that I do believe Madam Speaker Pelosi is agenda driven. And I believe that the factions of her party that control the agenda to which she adheres put themselves in a position where it would be beneficial to the narrative that they were pushing in support of their agenda if Trump supporters could be portrayed as violent insurrectionists.
Yes.
So I hope that it's a more thorough answer to your question.
Yes.
I don't claim to know the heart of Madam Speaker Pelosi, and nor do I cast condemnation upon her as a fellow child of God. I can say that the evidence appears to indicate that the agenda that's supported by Madam Pelosi and many of the members of her party felt that it was supportive of their hatred for President Trump and all of those of us that have supported him. Yes. If we could be portrayed as some kind of crazy lunatic right wing mob, and for them to pull the show of force, for instance, maybe you've heard me address this a couple of years ago in committee with Wray and the Oversight Committee. What the hell happened to the FBI? What do you think about that? And the National Guard. Why would the National Guard be pulled?
Yes.
On January the 5th, on the evening of January 5th, from a more active role on January 6th, when it's known to law enforcement that a show of force is very effective at quelling some potential criminal behavior or riotous behavior from a large group of people that have been incited, by whatever it is that's driving them, their anger with some significant series of events usually leads up to something like that. But in law enforcement, we know that a show of force is incredibly effective as a mechanism to control and to quell potential violence. So one of the most visible shows of force that we had set up prior to January 6th was a much more visible and involved National Guard.
Yes.
The president had approved it. It had gone through chain of command. They were ready. And why was that stopped by by
Why?
the mayor of DC, and who could possibly benefit from that? So I think this all lends to consideration of your question, good sir, of who would benefit from disruption on January the 6th.
Right. I lived in Washington, D.C., of course, defunding the police and BLM made me move my family to a safer place in the South, in Florida, place, relatively where you come from. And I'm very, very happy that I did that. But I saw National Guard staged in my neighborhood in Washington, D.C. Nobody was going to step to them. If there was National Guard at the Capitol, there would have been no January 6th. Just a couple of National Guard members at the Capitol. There would have been. Dude, those guys all decked out in tactical gear. You were not. Nobody's going to.
You don't mess with those guys.
No.
And to have, I just don't think it fit. If you go, let's just say for the sake of argument, for your audience that maybe has doubts that the FBI had staged participants in the crowd there that were encouraging the entry into the Capitol. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, let's say that did happen for your viewers that have doubts. Well, the presence of the National Guard would have really interfered with that operation.
Correct.
Because that show of force doesn't, the National Guard presence stands out visually, strategically, tactically, as you're looking at the perimeter protection of the Capitol and the security forces that are deployed. National Guard troops and Army trucks and tactical gear really stand out. So it would have been far more difficult for adjutant operators that were working within the crowd there with a particular mission to encourage entry to the Capitol, or indeed even inside the Capitol, waving people in. Because let me tell you, it's not easy to walk around the Capitol if you don't know where you're going. It takes years, if even working here, to know how to get around some of these buildings. So you don't just wander into the door of the Capitol and know where the hell to go in order to get to the House chamber. You have to have someone lead you there, unless you really, really have been there for quite some time. I'm telling you. Ask anybody that has toured through here. You have to have a tour guide, or else where would your tour go? You'd be lost in minutes. So it makes perfect sense that if you have members of Trump supporters rally that have come to the Capitol and find the doors open and they come in, well, how are they going to make it to the chamber unless someone leads them there? And who was there to lead them? Men dressed as Trump supporters. So the National Guard would have shut all that down. And who pulled the National Guard? Not President Trump. President Trump provided the National Guard properly through chain of command. But ultimately, that requires the official request of DC municipal government, working in coordination with the Speaker of the House. That's the way law enforcement works for the Capitol, working in conjunction with the city of DC, the Metro Police. That requires a coordinated official request of the mayor of DC and the Speaker of the House. So that was Nancy Pelosi and Mayor Bowser. So listen, we're not crazy when we're investigating and we're revealing uncomfortable facts. Yeah. We're revealing this stuff to the American people because this is America. It's not the Soviet Union.
Yes.
We're not China, man. We get to have a voice. And I didn't give up my right to have a voice when I swore my oath as a congressional servant to we the people.